Jugoslavio, Jugoslavio, svetli sunce nova sjana, ponosi posred Balkana, Jugoslavio, Jugoslavio.
Yugoslavia, a country once famed for functional multiculturalism and diversity, a glimmering beacon of hope in the communist world. The Balkan nation was home to significant Catholic, Orthodox, and Muslim populations, and such divergent demographics once lived in harmony. While political and social problems were present, as with any society, Yugoslavia was a name both the East and the West could respect and admire. However, with the fall of the Eastern Bloc in the beginning of the 1990s, things went exponentially downhill for Yugoslavia, as nationalism and ethnocentrism became preached by political leaders from each religious and cultural sphere. With divided politics and a crumbling economy, war inevitably broke out in 1991. However, these series of wars did not only come with political, economic, or environmental costs. These major conflicts also came with a horrendous human cost, since these wars were of genocidal intent. Manipulative politicians shifted the mindsets of the Yugoslavs, turning neighbors who once lived in harmony into mortal enemies with one another. People who were once ordinary civilians became war criminals. All of this took place in the middle of Europe, 50 years after the end of World War II. So much of the world neglected Yugoslavia and its innocent people trapped in turmoil, and by the time intervention became a priority of the West, the conflicts had already down-spiraled into uncanny regurgitations of the Holocaust. The use of ethnic cleansing became a common tool of warfare, which then formulated detainment camps and widespread instances of murder across battlegrounds in the former Yugoslavia. These wars ended over 20 years ago, but their effects have left a bloodstain in the Balkans which cannot be erased. To truly examine the prolonged issues ethnic cleansing has presented to the social and cultural aspects of the former Yugoslav society, it is crucial to understand Yugoslavia's turbulent history, the perspective of each ethnicity in every genocidal theater of war, how far these societies have come since the war's terminations, and what haunting effects linger. The Balkan Peninsula has historically been ruled by various empires of contrasting cultures and religions, such as the Byzantines, Italians, Austro-Hungarians, and Ottomans. It is for this reason that the cultures of the Balkans are so diverse. The region has many native Slavic ethnic groups who have accepted various traditions and religions from imperial rulers throughout past centuries. Following the end of World War I, the land that was once Yugoslavia united, forming the land of the South Slavs, or Yugoslavia. The prominent Slavic ethnic groups in Yugoslavia consisted of Catholic Croats and Slovenes, Orthodox Serbs, Montenegrins, and Macedonians, and Muslim Bosniaks. There was also a significant Muslim minority of Albanians, a non-Slavic ethnic group primarily inhabiting the Serbian region of Kosovo and northern Macedonia. The socialist nation was relatively peaceful up until World War II, when genocidal havoc once again plagued the Balkans. The Italians and Germans invaded Yugoslavia and formulated a Nazi puppet state, the independent state of Croatia, which was ruled by the Ustasha party and included all of Bosnia and Herzegovina and parts of Croatia and Serbia. In this fascist regime, all Serbs, Jews, and Roma gypsies were brutally genocided by the Nazis. Two resistance parties were formed out of the political crisis, the Chetniks and the Partisans. The Chetniks were a Serbian supremacist group who believed that Yugoslavia should be a royalist regime and possess a monarchy. They were also in violent opposition to any form of communism. However, the partisans were the remaining South Slavs who wished to liberate Yugoslavia and reinforce communism over the land. Josip Broz Tito led the partisans to victory, thus liberating Yugoslavia from fascist rule. Any form of nationalism was violently repressed, but the country began to prosper at an exponential rate following World War II. By the time the mid-60s had approached, Yugoslavia was by far the most liberal communist country in Europe. Civilians could travel to and from Yugoslavia whenever they wanted, and they could communicate and partake in worldwide development, quite unlike the rest of the East Bloc, which remained highly conservative and isolated throughout the 20th century. By the 1970s, both the East and West had positive views of Yugoslavia, and the nation received foreign aid from both political spheres. However, Yugoslavia's stability came to a screeching halt in 1980, when Tito passed away. Yugoslavia had never been ruled by any leader other than Tito, and no politician was strong enough or capable of filling his patriarchal parliamentary role in Yugoslavia. Instead, the Yugoslav government created a symbolic parliamentary system, where citizens would elect a representative for each of the 6 republics in Yugoslavia. These representatives would represent their own republic, and a symbolic president of Tito would rule in Belgrade, Yugoslavia's capital. However, it wasn't long before nationalist politicians began to rise to power, Slobodan Milosevic being the first notable nationalist. Milosevic was a prominent Serbian supremacist who formulated civil unrest, and such aggression provoked further instability, leading to extreme ideological and political divisions across the nation, thus brewing military conflict. The wars were initially about the degree of autonomy granted to each republic in Yugoslavia, and whether or not Yugoslavia should even remain united anymore. However, the hateful rhetoric of politicians brewed a murderous ideology of nationalism amongst the general populations, which then created conflicts of genocidal intent, leading to complete and utter devastation. While instability was present everywhere at one point or another in the former Yugoslavia during the 1990s, 3 parts of the country experienced widespread accounts of ethnic cleansing during these dire times, being the republics of Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the Serbian region of Kosovo. The war in Croatia was the first significant military conflict to take place in the former Yugoslavia. Croatia had declared independence in mid-91, but ethnic demographics created major complications. Croatia was primarily home to Catholic Croats, but a significant minority of Serbs also inhabited the country. The Serbs of Croatia did not want to depart from Yugoslavia, while the Croats did, and such ideological differences procured a revolution. The Serbs created ethno-states throughout the country, which is where ethnic cleansing first took place in the former Yugoslavia. Croats were forcibly displaced from these settlements, and consequences for staying could be deadly. Many towns were besieged, and Croats had to flee as discreetly as possible. While many besieged towns managed to survive Serbian forces, the eastern town of Vukovar fell in late 1991, and what came next for the Croats of Vukovar was tragic beyond belief. The innocents who survived the siege were subject to massacre, and Croat soldiers were forcibly displaced from the city, and were either taken to concentration camps or were executed. However, ethnic cleansing was not only carried out by Serbs. The Croatian government also used this aggressive tactic against the Serbs in 1995, during Operation Storm, a military assault on the Serbian-controlled territory in Croatia. During this event, all Serbian settlements were burned to the ground, and thousands of civilians were forcibly deported to either Serbia or Montenegro. The civilian costs that came with such violent aggression from both sides of the Croatian War have left long hostilities amongst both ethnic groups to this day, reshaping the socio-cultural relations between Croats and Serbs. To understand why such hostilities remain, it is quintessential to understand the perspective of both political parties. Yugoslavia, especially in its early days, had been a political system which inherently favored Serbs. The kingdom was originally ruled by a Serbian king and army, and the governmental structure was dominated by Serbs. For example, the capital of Yugoslavia, Belgrade, was also Serbia's capital, which meant that all other republics had weaker influence. It is only fair that the Croats had the right to decide their own future, and the consensus was that they deserved independence and should not be forced into a system which catered to Serbs. In the Croats' opinion, Operation Storm was a justified military conquest, since the Serbs were the initial aggressors and were guilty of grave human rights abuses. By reclaiming these forcefully annexed territories, justice was being served for the Croats who suffered from ethnic cleansing. The last time Croatia was a sovereign state before the disintegration of Yugoslavia, the Croatian Ustaša brutally genocided Serbs. Franjo Tuđman was the first president elected to rule Croatia following its declaration of independence, and bad memories from the Holocaust resurfaced. Tuđman's platform deemed Serbs as second-class citizens who would experience extreme oppression. It is for this reason that Serbs created ethno-states in Croatia, to protect themselves from a government which once genocided them. The Serbs also believed that Croatia should have the right to declare independence, as long as they would also grant the Serbian states in Croatia the right to declare their own sovereignty. In the Serbians' eyes, Operation Storm was an unjustified offensive based off the principle of ethnic cleansing. Despite violent histories and some hostilities that remain, the political relations between Croats and Serbs have improved exponentially since the 90s. Both countries have established diplomatic relations, and leaders of both Croatia and Serbia are striving for a brighter future. However, socio-cultural issues continue to further divide Serbs and Croats, which remains a problem in Balkan society. The ethnic demographics of Croatia have shifted immensely following the wars, since most Serbs were sent into exile following Operation Storm. This issue remains hugely controversial between Croats and Serbs, since the Croats view it as a nationalist holiday, whilst the Serbs view it as a time of mourning. There are also significant ideological discrepancies between many political Serbs and Croats over the Croatian War of Independence. The Croats view the Yugoslav National Army as a foreign invader of Croatia, while Serbs view the army as a defense protecting Serbs from inside Croatian front lines. Most evidently, the main difference is that Croatia and Serbia have distanced themselves from one another, and social connections between both groups have diminished greatly since the fall of Yugoslavia. While the political problems resulting from the wars are slowly redeveloping again, the improvement of socio-cultural problems created as a result of ethnic cleansing remain far more stagnant. Without question, the war in Bosnia was the most brutal conflict in the former Yugoslavia. The main reason why the Bosnian War was so extensively ferocious was due to the diverse and hugely scattered ethnic demographics of the nation. Roughly one half of Bosnia and Herzegovina is Bosniak, a third is Serbian, and the remainder is primarily Croatian. While certain areas had higher concentrations of ethnicities than others, the ethnic makeup of the land was completely scattered, with all ethnic groups inhabiting most towns. Croatia, Slovenia, and Macedonia had already made their moves and declared independence from Yugoslavia. By 1992, it was Bosnia's turn. However, the trilateral ethnic divisions in Yugoslavia, combined with the ethnocentric politicians, brewed a horrendous storm which created the worst conflict in Europe since World War II. A referendum on the matter of leaving Yugoslavia was held, with almost all Bosniaks and Croats voting to leave. However, most Serbs boycotted the vote and instead formulated their own entity in Bosnia and Herzegovina, known as Republika Srpska, led by Radovan Karadzic. The Bosniaks and Croats were initially united on the matter of maintaining a multi-ethnic Bosnia, but the Croats then paralleled the Serbs' nationalist sentiments and broke off from the Bosnian state, forming the Croatian Republic of Herzegovina. At that point, the Bosniaks were being fought at from every angle, and they struggled to fend off Croatian and Serbian expansion. As an Islamic ethnicity, the Bosniaks then turned to jihad in order to defend the Bosnian front lines by accepting foreign Islamic fighters from around the world to come reclaim Bosnian territory. 6 safe areas were created for Bosniak refugees to reside in amidst relentless Croatian and Serbian expansion, in the cities of Bihać, Sarajevo, Tuzla, Gorazde, Žepa, and Srebrenica. All cities were besieged extensively, but the enclave of Srebrenica fell in mid-95 to Serbian forces. The fall of Srebrenica was the worst case of ethnic cleansing in the former Yugoslavia, as over 8,000 Bosniak men and boys were slaughtered by Serbian soldiers within a matter of days. The Bosnian War was truly a humanitarian nightmare, and finding resolution to the unimaginably complicated situation seemed impossible during the conflict. Although peace is now maintained in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the nation and its people have been permanently scarred by this deeply tragic and murderous war. The The three ethnic perspectives on the conflict must be examined to truly understand the socio-cultural issues still present in Bosnia and Herzegovina to this very day. The Bosniaks were viewed as a threat by Serbs due to potential religious extremism, but this could not have been further from the truth. The Bosniaks are amongst the most liberal Muslims in the world, who have adopted a highly tolerant version of Islam. Bosniak politician Alija Izetbegovic, who led the Bosnian state during the war, had written a book called the Islamic Declaration in the 1970s, which outlined the moral obligations which Bosniaks should follow in order to maintain a righteous society. Serbs viewed the work of literature with assertive contempt, since they feared the book could formulate Bosniak nationalism, thus creating a Muslim state, which would greatly oppress non-Muslims. However, the book does not order the persecution of non-Muslims, and is completely compatible with a multi-religious society. Although the Serbs portray Bosniaks as an antagonistic threat, Serbs were the initial aggressors of the Bosnian War, who commenced the conflict by brutally besieging the once beautiful and multi-ethnic capital of Sarajevo. The Bosniaks were violently betrayed by both Croats and Serbs, thus succumbing to jihad was their last resort to survive genocide. The Bosnian army could not sustain the overwhelmingly powerful Serbian and Croatian forces, and foreign Islamic volunteer soldiers offered Bosniaks significant defense amidst pandemonium. The violence executed by Bosniaks was done solely out of defense, and was justified to withstand the staggeringly brutal Bosnian War. The Bosniaks are simply Serbs who converted to Islam in order to gain social status during the oppressive Ottoman Empire domination. When the Bosniaks focused more on their religious identity and less on their cultural traditions, then they further dissociated themselves from Serbs. Yugoslavia deemed Muslim as an official political entity in the 1970s, which augmented Bosniak nationalism and Islamic fundamentalism in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and was viewed as a threat by Serbs. Republika Srpska was created so that Serbs could be safe from a Bosniak-dominant government, which could lead to grave oppression of non-Muslims. In addition, Bosnian Serbs became demonized by the West due to numerous war crimes committed against Bosniaks. However, the Serbs were also subject to violent ethnic cleansing by Bosniaks, though these war crimes are rarely highlighted. The Serbs of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as in anywhere else in Yugoslavia, have been favored by the Yugoslav structure. The Serbian conquest of Bosnia and Herzegovina was the master plan to recreate a greater Serbia, which further proves the Serbs' desire for dominance over the Balkans. The Croats of Bosnia and Herzegovina bear an undeniable cultural similarity with the Croats of Croatia, making it logical for the Bosnian Croats to desire unification with Croatia. In addition, Bosnia and Herzegovina's political outlook amidst the turmoil of the war was highly chaotic, with the potential for the active oppression of ethnic minorities being a serious threat. Therefore, by unifying with Croatia, the Croats of Bosnia and Herzegovina would be safe from a potentially dangerous and volatile regime. Unlike Croatia, whose relations have improved drastically since the Yugoslav wars, the socio-cultural effects on Bosnian society remain far more problematic and divisive. In 1995, the international community devised a political structure for Bosnia and Herzegovina, called the Dayton Plan, which outlined the nation's parliamentary system as followed: a federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina for Bosniaks and Croats, Republika Srpska for Bosnia's Serbs, and Brčko district, a small semi-autonomous province, home to significant Bosniak, Croatian, and Serbian populations. The Dayton Plan was based on ethnic guidelines, which has created strong political divisions in the country. Serbs view the plan positively, since it grants them a significant portion of Bosnian territory, while Bosniaks and Croats hold more resentment for the structure, since they feel as though it entitles Serbian supremacy. Because of how dominant ethnic frontlines are in post-war Bosnia, many civilians never return to their original homes due to the trauma and discrimination that would consequently resurface. The country has yet to overcome old ethnic rivalries, since the distribution of Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs is far more divided and less scattered as it was prior to the disintegration of Yugoslavia. A prime example of such divisions is the education system in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Today, many schools continue to educate pupils based on their ethnicity, which greatly affects Bosnian youth's ability to overcome cultural differences. In addition to these divisive educational institutes, the students are taught their own ethnicity's history, thus reinforcing ideological discrepancies between the youth of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Bosnia's journey to peace has not been an easy one, but it will take more time to heal the deep socio-cultural wounds brought about from ethnic cleansing. Kosovo was the final major conflict in the former Yugoslavia, whose political instability had been brewing throughout the 1990s, and eventually ended in genocidal mayhem by the end of the decade. Kosovo has historically been a part of Serbia, but the land became heavily populated by Albanians during World War II. Their overwhelming influence in Kosovo began to dominate the region, which eventually created unrest in the late 80s, when tensions arose between Kosovar Serbs and Albanians over the matter of cultural influence in the region. Slobodan Milosevic was sent to Kosovo to quell unrest, but instead he re-enfranchised Kosovar Serbs, which led to significant Albanian persecution and repression. However, an Albanian resistance party had been developing during these years of maltreatment, known as the Kosovo Liberation Army, or the KLA for short. This group wished to break Kosovo away from Serbia and instead declare Albanian rule in the region. In 1997, Milosevic became the president of Yugoslavia, and the KLA launched full-fledged raids on Serbian police stations and military bases. Milosevic was swift to crack down on Albanian insurgency in Kosovo, and responded by aggressively attacking KLA-dominated territory, thus formulating an Albanian refugee crisis. The Contact Group, a coalition of the United States, the United Kingdom, Italy, France, Germany, and Russia, demanded a ceasefire in Kosovo, which Milosevic agreed to. However, he failed to follow through with his promise, because when the KLA continued to regroup in Kosovo, Yugoslavia launched a genocidal campaign in the region, forcefully displacing thousands of civilians. The international community was at the end of its rope with Milosevic, and NATO launched a large series of bombing campaigns in Kosovo and Yugoslavia. However, violent intervention only worsened Serbian aggression, when the government almost completely cleansed Kosovo of Albanians by deporting hundreds of thousands of Albanians to Albania, Northern Macedonia, and Montenegro. Many Albanians did return to Kosovo once peace had been restored in 1999, but the effects of ethnic cleansing in Kosovo have left major social repercussions between Serbs and Albanians to this day. Kosovo continues to remain a source of potential conflict, and understanding the perspectives of both ethnicities help give essential context to this deeply complicated issue. Albanians sided with the Nazis in order to gain autonomy in Kosovo, which is why Kosovo has such a significant Albanian presence. Under Nazi control, Serbs were genocided in Kosovo and pushed further out of their own territory. Following World War II, Tito forcefully repressed all forms of nationalism, which meant that Serbs could not reclaim their own province, which had been culturally stolen by Albanians. The West demonized Serbs for their use of ethnic cleansing in Bosnia and Croatia, but the West never acknowledged that Serbs too were victims of ethnic cleansing. The Kosovo Liberation Army used aggressive guerrilla tactics against Serbs, such as forced displacement, terrorizing refugees, and even using civilians as human shields, which meant that forceful Serbian intervention in Kosovo was justified. Kosovo had been home to Albanians a century before the creation of Yugoslavia, and when the nation was formulated, extreme oppression for Albanians ensued. Prior to World War II, Serbian settlers would seize property from Albanians, thus leaving them in a state of social isolation. However, the fall of Yugoslavia in World War II allowed Albanians to reclaim the lives they had lost from Serbian oppression. When Milosevic re-enfranchised Kosovar Serbs in the late 1980s, he also eliminated all autonomy Kosovo had, thus reintegrating it with mainland Serbia, which led to Albanian persecution. The Kosovo Liberation Army was formed with the intent of providing persecuted Albanians a chance to be free of domineering oppression from Serbs. The KLA was notably passive throughout the early to mid-90s, but Milosevic's rise to power in 1997 was the last straw, since peacefully resisting the Yugoslav government was simply not effective at protecting Kosovar Albanians. By launching attacks in Kosovo, the Albanians were standing up for themselves, ensuring that Serbs did not continue to degrade Kosovar Albanians as a people. Of all three genocidal conflicts in the former Yugoslavia, the present-day social effects from ethnic cleansing in Kosovo have left the most negative impacts on society, which have proven notably difficult to overcome. In 2008, Kosovo officially declared independence from Serbia, which has yet to be officially recognized as a sovereign state, thus making Kosovo disputed territory. Ethnic divisions are stronger than ever in Kosovo, with the majority of the region being inhabited by Albanians, and northern Kosovo being inhabited primarily by Serbs. Northern Kosovo remains highly unstable, with security being under constant threat, and vigilante attacks based off of ethnic hatred taking place frequently. The mentalities of Kosovar citizens have shifted immensely following the war, since vivid memories of such recent violence remains at the surface of everyday life. Many civilians desire revenge against the opposite ethnicity, which creates strong contempt, and even vigilante violence. Rape was a common tool of warfare in the former Yugoslavia, and this horrendous human rights violation continues to plague Kosovar society. Many Kosovar women were raped, which has created immense trauma, and these women subject to sexual violence have been neglected by communities, which only strengthens social isolation. Although active combat is no longer taking place in Kosovo, the region's socio-cultural status remains locked in a conflict dynamic, which could create an overwhelmingly strong divide between Serbs and Albanians that could take generations to overcome. The Balkans is one of the most ancient, diverse, and unfortunately, troubled regions on Earth. Whether or not active combat is taking place, there is always a threat that political conflict, through ethnocentric and religious divisions, could boil over, as showcased by the 1990s wars. More importantly, the former Yugoslavia highlights what happens when the international community neglects troubled nations for too long, and how failure to intervene only hurts the innocents, as we see today in places like Syria, Myanmar, and South Sudan. Ethnic cleansing is humanity's ultimate tool of evil, and such acts leave haunting scars on affected populations for generations to come. However, the hope for a brighter future has lifted the former Yugoslavia out of genocidal warfare, leading each nation born out of conflict to a state of peace. The scars of ethnic cleansing left on the cultures of the former Yugoslav society are irreversible, but we can all hope that new generations will continue to bury the past and create a more tolerant future, free from hatred, violence, and genocide.
When I close my eyes, I dream of peace. Once I had a home, once my life was good. Once my mother sang to me and held me. Then the fire came, falling from the sky. There is no one left who can protect me. War's a wicked bird that never comes to rest, feeding on the dreams of all the children. War's an evil bird flying in the dark. Every holy promise has been broken, but when I close my eyes, I dream of peace. I dream of flowers on the hill. I dream I see my mother smiling. When I close my eyes, I dream of peace. You stop the war, bring it to a close. You are tall and strong and I am just a child. blessed world where I can be a child. When you close your eyes, do you dream of peace? Do you dream of flowers on the hill? Do you dream you see your mother smiling? When you close your eyes, do you dream of peace? When you close your